It's that time of year again.
That's right, JoJo June.
That inconsistent time of year.
Yeah, it is consistent. It's every 2 years, but
Okay.
Yeah, well, you need to have a generation pass to the next
Yeah,
Joestar can arrive.
yeah.
I mean, after last time, like after the shit we went on last time when we cracked into our third eye and awakened that JoJo really is just Final Fantasy VII, we needed a break.
Yeah, you can only talk about JoJo for so long before you go crazy, which is what happened to Medi. But yeah, I figured I figured we could talk about. I don't know about y'all, but I think JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, other than like maybe Dragon Ball, is probably the like Japanese series that has the most amount of like weird rumors and kind of like misinformation about it.
Discounting video games.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can partially agree with that because there are a lot, and it all starts from like way before like JoJo caught on mainstream in the West, and it's mostly Western misinformation is where that comes from.
Yeah, like I've been into JoJo's Bizarre Adventure for like at this point just about 10 years because I started with the 2012 anime. And throughout that time there has just been so much shit that a lot of people have taken as fact and a lot of stuff that I've kind of like also fallen for that we'll get into, but we figured we would talk about some of the most prevalent and like kind of popular either misinformation or rumors or stuff that people still believe to this very day.
Yeah, this is not to be confused with misconceptions. Stuff like Polnareff actually being the turtle, or those are just like things that people like read and then they don't get it and they just assume that. Compared to like stuff that people, I think the difference is when people are like, oh no, there's this interview with Araki.
Yeah, this is less like, why didn't he use Starfinger ever again, and more about like widespread, like in some cases just lies about JoJo's Bizarre Adventure.
Yeah, and this partially comes from the fact that because JoJo has been a very popular series in other parts of the world, specifically in Japan itself, they had access to this information, like the interviews that Araki has done for Jump, that we only got access to way later when we got them translated and we got answers to things and why things are the way they are. So it was a lot of Western perspectives trying to put together, and then just people, I guess, at one point said one thing and that caught on like wildfire, and it's interesting to see now what could have been if we had those interviews back then.
Yeah, I think JoJo's is really interesting just because, like, that's pretty uncommon when a series that, like, obviously there were people that were into JoJo's Bizarre Adventure before 2012, but when a series that just has, 30 years of material is kind of suddenly jumped onto people like that, it just leads to a lot of, like, kind of information overload. And so people tend to just make shit up.
And a lot of what ends up being made up is stuff that can't be verified just by reading the manga, because they're like, oh no, he wanted to do this, but didn't.
Or in some cases, it's like, he wanted to do this, but at gunpoint, the editors of Shonen Jump made him not.
It would be too real.
Yeah, it'd be too hardcore.
Kicking off our list of 8 rumors, one for each part, except like a lot of them are from the
totally planned.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why it's in this awful non-order.
Yeah. So yeah, no, we don't have one for battle tendency. Yeah. So we were so close. Kicking things off with the first piece of misinformation that gets spread around.
All right, sweet.
Josuke's savior.
Yeah, all right. So this is one that I think is very near and dear to my heart. Like, this is the one that I probably get the most kind of heated about, because Josuke is, like, not only is he my favorite JoJo character, he's one of my favorite characters, like, ever. And this is something that gets brought up, like, all the time. People are not willing to give up on this little, like, tidbit.
Yeah, it's probably the most I've had to see be refuted, and so much so that, like, new videos come out now to remind people that, no, it's not that stupid theory. It's very clear in the series that it was just a random bypasser.
Right, so as a quick refresher course, as we learn, Josuke's, the reason why he styles his hair like that is because when he was a little baby and he was suffering from the Joestar family stand AIDS, his mom was trying to get him to the hospital. She got stuck in the snow, and this like hooligan kid with a like Yankee style haircut came and like helped her get out of the snow. And ever since then, Josuke kind of looked at that guy as just being like an anonymous sort of symbol of like good and human decency, and that's why he styles his hair that way.
It's a nice reflection of the themes of JoJo, that people are inherently good, and that it's about people with good hearts overcoming great evils in fantastical ways. And a random bypasser who, on the surface, looks like a street punk, helping a woman get her child to the hospital is one of the most blatant versions of that I can think of. But some people believe, due to another stand in Part 4, that being Bites the Dust and its sort of time loop ability, that at one point Josuke was supposed to be sent back in time to be his own savior and create that, is that sort of a grandfather's paradox?
It's kind of like something like that.
Or like a self-fulfilling prophecy or something.
Yeah.
But nothing has shown that there are people who would say that, oh, in this interview, when in fact, actually, in an interview, during Part 4's run, I believe it was around Rock, Paper, Scissors Kid, Araki himself said that it had nothing to do with the plot. It was just the reason Josuke styled his hair. It wasn't going to come back. It had nothing to do with that. There's never been a thing that has hinted that Josuke was ever going to be that kid. Bites the Dust doesn't work the way people think it does. That time loop wouldn't have made sense given how the power was demonstrated beforehand. And also, people believe that Josuke's... This is one that Hamon Beat brought up in his discrediting video recently. People like to point at, like, Josuke has these injuries that are the same injuries that the kid has, but he gets those injuries after Rocky has fully explained how Bites the Dust works. So...
Also, I think people forget that Josuke in that fight had a fucking pillar going through his torso.
Yeah, the injuries don't even look the same. It's... Because the kid has, like, I think he's bleeding from his forehead a little bit, which the forehead... for a fun pro wrestling tip, you can make the forehead bleed like a motherfucker if you want to, and not have it do any lasting damage. You just need to hit it on the top. Our foreheads love to bleed. It's like one of the highest high blood pressure there, so it bleeds really fast. And he had like a scuffed lip. Almost all of his injuries can be attributed to a fight, like just a full-on fist fight. And like his outfit looks nothing like Josuke's. It seems to be a different school's outfit. It looks actually more like a Jotaro school outfit. And I believe Moriocho was a small town at that time, so I don't know if they even had a school system or a school district like they do now, because it was so underdeveloped. They didn't have snows, or they didn't have good roads built up for the snow, or a freak snowstorm like that, which is the reason why she was getting
they
stuck.
were just libertarian at the time.
They didn't believe in roads.
No wonder Kira got away for it for so long.
That was it. That was in an Araki interview, actually.
Yeah.
And also, his outfit has none of Josuke's insignias on it. It has a third-year pin, implying that this person was in his last year, would likely graduate and vanish. And also, like, Josuke has a very clear design to him. And this guy, the only thing they have in similar to them is that they are both injured at one point in life. And they both have their pompadour. Also, they both wear a school uniform, but Josuke becomes like a truant and never takes off his uniform ever. Even when they flash forward like 10 years in the Thus Spoke series, he's still wearing a school uniform. I don't know what the fuck that's the real question. What's happening there? Why don't they ever change their outfits?
Yeah, plus the hairstyle, like, during the 80s, that was kind of just, like, the hair that hooligans, like, had. Like, all the time, people will bring up in Part 4, like, that hairstyle is so out of date.
Yeah, I like that, because his hairstyle is very much not of the time. And I believe that was because Araki wanted to make, like, the delinquent with the heart of gold, and Josuke would appear as a delinquent immediately to the people. Because that used to be, like, wearing your hair like that would have been a big, like, statement in Japan. We don't see it as much of a statement here, but it means a lot to Josuke. And he gets a lot of shit for it, but he is styling himself after his savior.
Yeah, I think that's part of why this one bothers me so much, is because, like, it's taking this moment that was supposed to be really indicative of this character and, like, his own moral values and why he gets so pissed off at the hair, and they stop and go, but what about time travel?
It would have been more cool if Josuke inspired himself.
It would have been epic.
And it's like, why do you read JoJo? JoJo is not about that. Or the people who come up with theories later on, like, yo, no, when Josuke gets into his third year, that's when he's gonna time travel.
Yeah.
Like, the people who, like, headcanon a future event that puts Josuke in that position, that's, like, the real, like, crazy stuff for me. Like, if you enjoy the series for that, that's fine, but don't go pretend like that's what Araki was intending.
Yeah, especially when he says in the middle of part 4, like, I could understand if years and years down the line he did an interview and he was like, oh yeah, that wasn't the point or the purpose of that flashback, but he did it in the middle of the part.
Yeah, and it was the best part because he was being interviewed by someone who asked him, like, yeah, so when's that thing about Josuke's backstory going to come back up? He's like, that was just a flashback. That doesn't matter. And the guy was like, what? Huh? It's just, there is enough evidence to suggest that this is playing into the themes of JoJo and the niceness of a golden-hearted delinquent, because Moriocho is literally the town of golden hearts, and it's full of a bunch of weirdos, but they can be good people, and they come together and they wipe out a true evil of Yoshikage Kira, and that's part 4. It's great.
It's very great, but Araki forgot about Josuke, how he time traveled to himself, so it's bad actually. So yeah,
it's like the fucking jumping jacks and the logic people use. Like, God, it doesn't help that we aren't experiencing JoJo as it was being written, because they get the whole of part 4 all at once, and then they can make an assumption based on how the writings were going, instead of the weekly chapter-by-chapter experience.
Yeah.
Alright. So the next rumor on our mystery list is Avdol was brought back, I believe due to his popularity.
Yes, this one's a little... like, so in part 3, Avdol gets seemingly killed by Hull Horse and Hangman. I think it's J-Guile.
Yeah.
Then a few chapters later, during Judgment, Judgment, I think it is, the genie who creates things out of stone, he comes back, and it's revealed that he had faked his death so that the Stardust Crusaders could get a submarine. Now, some people believe, and for the longest time it's something that I thought as well, that Avdol was brought back from the dead because fans really liked Avdol, and Araki received letters about how much they missed Avdol, so he brought him back, and then he killed him again in a more violent way. So, when in reality, Araki killed Avdol with the full intention of bringing him back. I believe it's written in Avdol's Jejonium, the cover that has Avdol on it, that he killed Avdol to spice up the story of part 3. He did not kill him and then bring him back. He was always intending to bring him back, but he wanted to get the reader's attention, so he killed a character very early into part 3, and it is super early. It's hard to think about how early that is. I think it's like the 5th fight, I think, in the part.
Yeah, they had only fought not even 10 stand users.
Yeah, because it was like the Kakyoin, Greyfly, and all those others, but then the whole horse shows up and just snipes one of them dead. And that was supposed to like put in a like anyone can die feel like into the part, while also tying into Polnareff's own story. It was a nice little moment, and he gets brought back, and it's a good, and the fact that he had like tilted his head back up and got a scar across his head. I think it's just a really rude plot point, and obviously you can feel a little cheated by it because Araki really did, that was his intention. He was sort of cheating the reader into thinking that stakes had increased, but he was never intended to die there.
Yeah, I think, like, later on, he pulls basically the same trick way more effectively with Kakyoin, to where he's like, yeah, I'm just gonna knock Kakyoin out for a little bit, make him blind. But I think it was the lengths he went to try to get him out of the picture for a bit that, like, I can totally see people being like, yeah, this feels a little weird. Like, I'm pretty sure that guy was dead, actually. But no, he was okay, actually, so.
Yeah, and, like, this is one where I feel like people created the justification so that the series would make more sense from our perspective, when in reality, it was just a tool to make the plot more interesting. Also, it's funny that you mentioned Kakyoin going blind. He actually doesn't go blind. He gets cut in parts of his eyes, but they aren't critical to see. Him wearing sunglasses is just a cool reveal.
Ah, sweet.
You can see perfectly, and that's a since we're talking about common misinformation and stuff, even though this is more of a misconception, I just wanted to mention that because he can see. Because if he couldn't see, a lot of his stand would be pretty useless, especially like his.
Just emerald splashing random buildings in Egypt. Yeah, he misses the shot on the clock. Just it's like, what the fuck?
Mr. Joestar, It just doesn't hit anything.
What was he trying to tell me?
And also, if someone would use the justification, you can see through his stand. Any damage done to you is affected on your stand. We can see that through Polnareff and Silver Chariot, where when Polnareff loses his legs, so does Silver Chariot. So if Kakyoin went blind, then he would not be able to see through Hermit Green, or Hierophant Green.
Speaking of Hermit, our next rumor is the world is all stands.
This is one that really got me for a while. So the rumor, as I remember it going, is that the world as it is at the end of JoJo is different than what Araki originally intended. The Dio was originally going to have all the stands of the tarot, and that was the world's ability. And the reason people believe this is during the beginning of Part 3, Dio is able to track the Joestars through using Hermit Purple and the spirit photography ability to take pictures of them the same way they are taking of him. And so there was a belief for a while that the world was going to be like that. And this partially comes from a misattributed quote where when the world was being designed, I believe I'd have to look it up fully, but I'll do that right now since this is about. But when the world was being designed, Araki's editor, I believe, was in the hospital, so he couldn't look over the design fully, and so it's one of the designs that Araki designed without like an editor oversight.
I believe that the Hermit Purple that Dio is using is just a Joestar family, like inherited stand.
Sort of. The justification is in JoJo A Go-Go, a art book that went over the details on stands and cleared up misinformation. Araki went into it, and what Dio used there was Jonathan's stand from Jonathan's body, which was the same stand as Joseph. I believe that he doesn't explain why it's the same stand, but later on when he does the Jojonium for Joseph, he talks about how Hermit Purple was designed to be the stand of the Ripple, as it's supposed to design, like, what would the Ripple look like if it was in physical form, and then if the Part 3 crew went back in time and they looked at Joseph when he was young in Part 2, they would see Hermit Purple wrapped around him.
Would that be the same for Jonathan?
Assumedly, because the reason Dio can use that Hermit Purple ability is it's Jonathan's body stand.
Yeah, I remember that whole thing being a big, like, topic of contention, especially a few years ago, was like, what the hell was the Hermit Purple thing that Dio did?
Yeah, it's a very weird moment because it doesn't really come up ever again, and I do like that there's sort of a callback to it, because when Dio is fighting Joseph, he calls Hermit Purple, like, the weakest stand. Because of all the stands that he would have context for, Hermit Purple's the one that he would understand the most. And I'm not sure if Araki intended that, because I don't know if Araki actually really cared too much about the Hermit Purple ability after Dio was already fighting them face-to-face, but I like to think about that as a cool little thing that Dio did.
Speaking of weakest stands, up next we have the strongest stand, Fugo's removal. He was too OP. They had to send him away.
Now, this Fugo misinformation it's weird because I don't know where it started from, but I do know where I first heard it from. There was a guy who used to do JoJo manga breakdowns before the series got like really popular, and I believe he is the one who brought it up. And I wish I remembered his name. He had a European accent. Maybe other people remember him, but I believe he stopped doing videos on his channel after a while, around the time JoJo actually got popular. But I think that was because he was like focusing on real life stuff. But he mentioned that Araki would remove Fugo because Purple Haze was too powerful for the rest of the series, and that he regretted making a stand that powerful, and so he just wrote him out of the story.
What he actually regret was a traitor plotline involving Fugo, and he just didn't want to see his friends fight.
Yep. It's one of the moments. It's very similar to the Avdol thing, where this was a moment of the author like feeling like wanting to do something, but like feeling a tinge of regret. But this is where it got really personal to him, because when he was writing part 5, he was in sort of a like sad state. He felt he wasn't things weren't happy in his life, according to the interview. This comes from and for reference, like, this comes from part 5's physical release after it was in circulation, and this is the goodbye note written on like the last volume. We never got it, so that's probably why this rumor spread as much as it did. But he talks about how part 5 gave him that hope. He felt like he was good friends with the crew as he was writing them. It made him feel good, and he couldn't wrap his mind around the idea of friends stabbing each other in the back. So originally, Diavolo had a plant within Bruno's gang, and it was assumedly Fugo, because Fugo's the one who stayed behind. And so, when it came to betraying the gang, Fugo was going to stay behind and later come back in a plot point where he would eventually be killed by Giorno. But Araki did not want to see his friend die, and so he just cut Fugo out of the story entirely. It had nothing to do with his stand. Nothing about Araki's writing suggests that a powerful stand would be written out of the story. He let Okuyasu run around in all of part 4 without any restrictions
or supervision.
Yeah, that like talk about a powerful stand. Or he just lets Rohan run around doing his fucking criminal investigation. He literally walk up and write on it anyone. Araki will write ultra powerful stands into the story, and Purple Haze, as strong as it is only really good on one-on-one conflicts. It's an uncontrollable 5 meter or it's either 5 meters or 5 millimeter. It's a really small death range, but it's a death bomb, and it's not very helpful for the crew. It would not win as many fights as people think it would, given how many long range options a lot of the enemies have. So it being written out for being too powerful doesn't make any sense. Araki has gone on to say why he wrote him out of the story, and eventually a novel would be made called JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Golden Wind, or Golden Heart, Golden Ring, I think is what it's called. And it's the continuation past the point of Fugo's betrayal. I believe it happens right after Squalo and Tiziano. And it talks about this traitor plotline, where Fugo comes back into the story, is a traitor, eventually goes back on his betraying and helps the gang escape later. But we do get to see what the traitor plotline would have looked like slightly.
Yeah. It had nothing to do with his power level. It was just emotionally draining to Araki, who had made a really nice friend at summer camp.
All right, so next up, I'd say this is probably the one that for the longest time that I kind of believed in, and I feel like, especially out of all these, this is the one where it's easiest to if you're just reading the manga, to try to come to this conclusion. And it's the pretty broad topic of Made in Heaven transitioning into Steel Ball Run.
Yeah, this is probably, I mentioned the Josuke one. This is probably the most contested theory misinformation in all of JoJo. And I guess, assuming there's going to be a spoiler warning, at the end of part 6, Pucci gets the power of Made in Heaven, which allows him to accelerate time to such a degree that he can restart the universe and go back to, and basically the universe is on an infinite loop, and he just keeps cycling through them. He does it for one loop, and eventually gets defeated, and it goes into what is referred to in the fanbase as the Arenaverse, where Jolene is reborn as Irene Cujo, Anasui is reborn as Atticus, I think Hermes is just Hermes, and Foo Fighter, or Weather Report is just Weather Report. But basically, what Made in Heaven does is it takes all living things, imagine life matter, all that gets moved to the next universe. If you're alive, you just get dumped in the next universe where you were. And the idea was to make it so that everyone knew what their fate was, because they'd see their fate play out. But if you died, you got recreated by the stand user. So that's why Jolene gets, in the first loop, Jolene gets remade as sort of a bee Jolene. Instead of having a butterfly tattoo, she has a bee, and she has 4 pigtails, and Jotaro is sort of this meek looking small, I think he's just as built, but he's like has way less confidence, and we don't get to see what the others look like. But when he's defeated in a pretty cool way, it cycles back. I don't remember if it actually goes into a third uncontrolled universe, or if it goes back to the original universe, but with the characters technically fixed, but not actually them. There's a lot of ways you can interpret Part 6 ending, but one way a lot of people did was assume that the universe, or that the Irenaverse and Steel Ball Run were the same universe. That Pucci had reset the timeline so hard that we go back in time to the Old West and see what Jonathan, now Johnny Joestar, was doing and how everything changed. When in reality, Araki just set it in a new continuity. And a lot of this confusion started up because Steel Ball Run is a very odd way to do a 7th part of a series, especially if they are still connected in some way.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where it all comes from. It's just the fact that, you're reading the manga, Part 6 ends, and then you turn to the next page, and it's, all right, now we're in another universe, and we have, alternate interpretations of Dio and Jonathan and, Caesar, so... And then you look back and you think, oh, well, Jolene was different, and so was Anasui, so this must just be, that universe's incarnation of these characters.
Yeah, and I think it's a fair conclusion to jump to in your first reading, but as far as I know, the biggest discrediting to it, there could be another interview where it talks about it that I haven't seen, but I remember getting the information from actually talk about All-Star Battle, in which Araki was asked about the Josuke in Part 8 and Part 4. And his answer was that they are not the same in either soul or body. So that Josuke and Josuke, or Gappy, are not the same person from a different universe. They are just two characters from other, universes or dimensions, however you want to put it, because dimensions and universe gets a little wacky thanks to Steel Ball Run and D4C, but two characters from separate, not even continuity, actually I guess continuities is the best way to put it, that just so happen to have the same name.
Alright, talking about alternate versions of characters, we have Anasui was planned to be a girl.
Yeah, I think out of all of these, this is the one that's the most, weird, especially if you don't know anything about, you don't read any interviews or, the only thing that exists is JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, right? Because this is admittedly very strange.
Alright.
In Anasui's first appearance, prior to, even really speaking, there's a female appearance for him.
A very strong female appearance. It appears in, I think, 4 or 5 panels, so it wasn't even just, a single mistake. There was a focus shot on it. Very much dressed female, so much so that they had a fully covered chest, which is not what Anasui wears. Anasui's outfit is very revealing of his chest.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that really made this kind of feel like a weird design is there is a chapter cover that focuses on them, where it has the top half, or the lower half of Guess's body, and female Anasui in it. And that really laid into the idea that this character was originally supposed to be a girl, and if they were written the same way that Anasui was, they were going to be a stark lesbian for Jolene. And people assume that Anasui had to have their gender changed because of the mean old, what are they?
Editors
Editors at Shonen Jump.
Oh, those monsters.
Those absolute monsters that,
They tell Toriyama to change his bug man.
Yeah, and that's a lot of the boogeymen for some of these theories, is that the editors come in and tell Araki what to do. Araki has had cases where the editors have told him something, but if he believed firmly enough in it, he would stick to it. One case being, going back to the first point, Josuke's hair. The editors told him that Josuke's hair would not work for a protagonist in Jump. Araki believed strong enough in it that he stuck to the hair. He made Josuke's hair the way it is because that's how he believed the character needed to be. Another case of this being, there was actually an instance where he changed the gender of a character, and this could be where the Anasui thing comes from. When writing Part 5, Giorno was originally supposed to be a girl. That's something that it doesn't really come up too often, and he was told that he should change it to be a boy because a boy would appeal more to the group, and so he did, because it didn't matter to him too much that Giorno was a girl. And he also, I believe for a while, he had trouble writing women as characters. Part 5 is a great example of that, as there is one woman in the entire fucking part. So he had trouble writing female characters, and that changed around the time that he wrote Part 6, where he has an entirely female cast except for like 3 character or female main cast. A lot of female stand users, and it was really when he started just like experimenting with things. And one of the things he wanted to do was make a sort of gender ambiguous character. And that's why he created Anasui the way he did. Foo Fighter even mistakenly identifies them as a girl when they first see them, and then Anasui reveals that they are a man. And there's a lot of weirdness about it, but interestingly enough, apparently to Araki, Anasui's gender doesn't really matter to him, as according to an interview when Part 6's anime when the characters were being discussed for the Part 6 anime, Araki said that he wouldn't care if they drew Anasui as a girl for the Part 6 anime. So he is supposed to be a gender-ambiguous character, mostly identified as a man in the series, because I believe he has to technically be identified as a man to show his entire, his chest the way they do.
So we were robbed, is what you're saying.
I think we were robbed of the female Anasui anime. Unless the Blu-ray DVDs come out and there's just all of Anasui's characters redrawn in the female. Man, can you imagine? We get the Blu-ray DVDs and there's like the female Anasui. There's an option in the menus like male or female Anasui.
Yo, that sounds awesome.
That's the best DVD menu one I've ever seen.
Speaking of DVDs that we'll never own.
Oh my god, you found a way to transition it! I had no idea how we were gonna do this!
So there was a Phantom Blood movie made by Studio APPP, I think it is, or it might be AAAP. I forget. It's one of those acronyms. I'm bad with acronyms. They're the ones who made the JoJo Part 3 OVA series. They were made to make a Phantom Blood movie, and there was a big push for it marketing wise. There's a PS2 game associated with it. There's snippets and footage all around. But it's lost to time. And for a while, a lot of theories were going around online that it was lost to time because Araki disowned it, and hated it, and you wanted it burned.
If Araki is hating something, then, like, it's probably, like, bullshit. He just seems like a very, like, hateless man.
Whenever anyone brings up that Araki doesn't like something or they hate something, he had it cut for that reason, I immediately don't believe them. Mainly because every instance of that has been proven to be an uncited source, at least from what I can think of, and that we have seen Araki interact with some very strange people, and he has let this all go through because Araki is a very, like you mentioned, a very kindly man, as far as we know. He literally sat down and...
You see him talking to, like, Shoko Nakagawa, and she's like, I want Jotaro to beat me up.
And spit in my mouth.
He's just like, well, that's good.
Or when she asked him about the 9/11 conspiracy. Like, he has been on the receiving end of a lot of strange shit for the work that he does. And originally, he even talked about how JoJo was something that he wouldn't mind writing until he died. I think that he has a very strong, loving connection to this series, and it's allowed him to do a lot of things. If you're telling me that he disowned this movie, even without any source, or that he hates anything else, I'm likely not going to believe you, because, of course, the Phantom Blood movie's disappearance from online stems from the fact that there was never a local release because Studio AAAP, or APPP, lost the rights to the movie after an incident, lost the rights to the JoJo IP after an incident in the Part 3 anime became controversial. If you don't know about that, in the Part 3 OVA, there is a moment where Dio was reading a book in Egypt, and the book that they chose to pick was the Quran, the Islamic holy book. And that became a controversial thing, because later on in that part, I believe they are blowing up mosques.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very much not well received. And that became controversial, and so they lost the JoJo IP, and so they lost the ability to release the movie in home theaters. The movie also wasn't very much liked by critics. It was considered to be a bit rushed. It cut out, supposedly, it cut out characters like Speedwagon. Because we don't actually have access to the movie itself, we don't know. There has been a large effort to see if there's any way, because there's been like a huge restoring effort where people have gone through and restored parts of the movie, and it's actually really cool. There's people hoping that at one point they might be able to find the original film reel. As far as we know, the movie was not disowned. It's just a piece of lost media because of unfortunate situations that led it to being in sort of a rights hell. And this is why copyright law is terrible, and we should dismantle it.
Another sort of like side rumor I heard attached to that is the reason why it never got a DVD release is because it just like performed really badly in theaters, which just seems very weird to me because like it's JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, like it's a pretty big fucking series.
Yeah, that's one of the popular reasons. I think it just did okay, like it didn't do exceptionally, and so that they didn't have the right, there wasn't enough push to make the movie, because if it was like a gangbusters like Mugen Train level success, then whether if they had the rights or not, that thing would have probably gone to DVD.
Originally, when writing this down, I was going to also mention that there was a Battle Tendency movie that was also rumored, but that one there is evidence of a Battle Tendency movie being planned, or at least a post-credit stinger for Battle Tendency.
Yeah, they're like sketches of Speedwagon, Strazo, and the Pillarman location.
Yeah.
Or the Cars' lab in Mexico.
Yeah, I haven't... Do we have a transition for this?
So this one is a complete mystery to me. Y'all brought this up, I had no idea what you were talking about.
Okay, no idea what you're talking about? Speaking of having no idea what they're talking about, Harano Higashikata was a gaslighting effort from the Part 8 fandom to fool people into believing that there was a secondary protagonist by the name of Harano Higashikata. A lot of like notable figures in the JoJo fan base were in on this.
A lot of it actually, from what I know, and this is as far as I know from an outsider source, and I talked with the guy I believe who started it, Aeon Star, a very good JoJo channel. He made a lot of really cool stuff when JoJolion was still running, and he was talking about misconceptions in JoJolion, and one of them he mentioned is Harano Higashikata. And then he made a follow-up post, which was calling out people like, what? Who's Harano? How do you forget the second most important character in JoJolion? Now, the name Harano Higashikata is a clear joke on the fact that the main character of Part 8 is Josuke Higashikata. And Josuke is a mixture of two people. Because he is half of two people, the joke is that Harano is the other half of those two people. And that Harano gets his name from Giorno's original Japanese name, as he was Harano Hashibana. But when he moved to Italy, he changed his name to Giorno Giovanna. And the whole joke was that it was basically making fun of people who don't actually read the manga, or at least poking fun. Not making fun makes it seem a little bit more malicious. But creating these scenarios like, oh, you don't remember this plotline where Harano did this, or one of the more forgotten characters, he disappeared from the plot for a bit. And because it was very easy to make Harano screen or shitpost, because Harano is just Josuke with a little curve to the side, and his outfit is red, and because it's a black and white manga, you don't show the color very often. It became one of the funnest like little posts to run with, because if you were in on the joke, you knew that you could go and people didn't take it too far to the extreme either. It was like proposing like actual things, like to explain certain plot points. His involvement with like some characters who were off screen, like Kirara. I don't actually. This is the first time I'm saying Carrera. That's her name. Who is the Love Deluxe user, or Love Deluxe. It's one of those two. The Yukako surrogate in JoJolion's story, who appears for a couple chapters, tells Josuke that she'll be back later in the plot, and then never shows up. And the idea is that for people who are talking about that, you can sort of poke fun at them for only wiki diving to the point that you bring up Harano and say that, oh, Harano and Carrera were doing something in this plot line, and you'd have to actually read the manga. It was actually sort of a way to encourage people to read the manga, I guess, to disprove that rumor. And it got so... It blew up immediately because a lot of people jumped in on the joke. You had fake screenshots being made by some of the best artists in the JoJo community. You had a JoJo wiki fake page made for him that had like bunch of sources for what chapters he appeared in. It was a fantastic little like. It lasted about a week, but it kept bringing up, and this all occurred like April 27th of 2021, and it was just such a fun little like part of the community. And I hope Aeon Star is very proud of his baby boy.
Man, those malicious Part 8 fans coming out of this. I can't believe they do that.
It was a mass gaslighting attempt by Part 8's fan base because I think there was like that was around the time that we were like JoJo was coming to a close, and there were a lot of plot points coming up, and there's a if you're reading Part 8 as it was coming out and you don't have the ability to just read it as a whole part now, oh man, watching that month-to-month cycle was funny. And then you just reached a point where I think it was on a hiatus is why this encourages, so there was a JoJolian drought, and it was just a fun little thing that the community got around to, and some people really didn't like it. I thought it was pretty funny, and I think the fan art that spawned from it is fantastic, and I really hope that people enjoy Harano now looking back on it as what he was. A beautiful moment in the community where everyone came together and created extra lore for a character.
All right, I'd say those are pretty much the major ones. Like those are the ones that people usually think of when they think of like just fake shit when it comes to JoJo, right?
Yeah, I think that's like all the major moments of like large spreading misinformation. Like there's probably like a bunch of them a bunch of smaller ones, like Araki said this in this interview, or Araki said that in that interview. Like, some current ones where someone will create a fake subtitles for an old Araki interview, and where he'll say something and people will cite that.
This was a good video. Yeah. I'm glad that we dispelled some misinformation. We put our own in there. Let's see if you caught that. One of us always tells lies.
And the other always tells the truth.
And then there's Nick. There's Fither.
True.
True. He's the one who tells the truth.